Pop Shield, a long-form discussion podcast about musical topics both past and present. I'm Gabe, and I'm joined as always by Dan.
Hello.
And Darren.
Hello.
So before I ask you guys what you've been listening to lately, I want to read a review we got on Apple Podcast from not Darren's husband. That's a inside joke, long-time listener. But he wrote, or she wrote, Gabe, Nina Simone can't have one of the best albums of the 60s because the songs don't fit together. Also, Gabe, the best types of albums follow after the White Album by rejecting cohesion. Still gave us 5 stars, so give me some shit, but all in good fun. I just wanted to address it because I feel like the difference is a lot of the Nina Simone songs suck. But, touche, anyway. Really, I just want to remind everybody to leave us a review. It really, really helps us reach more listeners. And if it's funny, I'll read it on the show just like this. Now, what have you guys been listening to lately?
Yeah, I've been getting into, from 2018, the Last Daughters record, You Won't Get What You Want. Fantano gave it a perfect 10. And
really?
It just sort of like slipped by me a little bit. Like I had listened to it like once and, just kind of forgot about it. But that album is like really fucking good. It's like Swans with like Danzig singing on it or something, with like some math rock or something in it. It's really awesome.
Yeah, I heard all the hype, but I just like never got around to it. But maybe I should check it out. What about you, Darren?
I was doing a lot of flying this past week, and unfortunately, I didn't have a whole lot downloaded on my phone, so I kept listening to Amnesiac by Radiohead just over and over again. And God, that album, we're gonna have to do an episode on that album because
I agree.
When I was talking about like the 10s from Radiohead last week, I wasn't thinking of Amnesiac. I was thinking of like In Rainbows, OK Computer, Kid A. Amnesiac is the 4th. Like that is a 10 album for sure.
So now we don't have to review it because you just spoiled it. Anyway, speaking of Radiohead, let's jump into today's topic. I knew that Tom York had attended a Billie Eilish concert and said some positive things about her sometime in the past, but right after we recorded our Tom York Radiohead episode 2 weeks ago, we were all pretty amused to read a report that Tom actually met Billie backstage and told her, quote, "You're the only one doing anything fucking interesting nowadays." In fact, Tom is not the only rock dad to stan Billie Eilish lately. Dave Grohl, Billie Joe Armstrong, and Stephen Malkmus have all apparently taken their kids to her concerts and had nice things to say. And even Michael Gira of Swan shared a Billie Eilish video and wrote, "This is what my 12-year-old daughter listens to. Not too terrible, actually. BE is self-motivated, precocious, a real go-getter, not such a bad influence." These endorsements are only remarkable because Billie Eilish is proving to be one of the most divisive pop stars in recent memory. At this point, I think we have no choice but to dive deep into her debut album, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go?, and try to figure out why for ourselves. Let's start by going over our previous familiarity, opinions on Billie Eilish. Have you listened to her before? Were you at least aware of all this buzz, all this backlash?
I was aware of her. I thought I had heard a song or two, but I didn't recognize anything from the record. So I think this was actually my first time ever actually hearing her.
Yeah, I think I actually mentioned listening to her at the top of one of our episodes a while back.
Oh, yeah, you did, yeah.
Yeah, a friend at work had been like, "Have you listened to this Billie Eilish? She knows I do a podcast." And so I was like, no. So I checked it out. I listened to Bad Guy and Wish You Were Gay. I guess those were like the big hits at the time. And, I like those songs. I thought they were great, and then that was kind of it until now.
Yeah, I kept hearing all the like back and forth on Twitter and stuff. And, I do want to emphasize that it would be kind of weird for us to like bother discussing just something that like, I don't know, teenage girls really love, like why bother attacking or defending that? But I really became, amazed when I saw like music critics that I follow on Twitter, like kind of staunchly defending her. And it's just been capped off by all of these like famous artists actually defending her as well. So I was just kind of aware of this back and forth. At one point, I like went to YouTube and just clicked on the first video that popped up. I think it was Bury a Friend or something. Mm-hmm. And just as soon as I saw that it was like really goth or whatever, I just turned it right off. But, so this was really my first time listening. Now, for you guys, I mean, with your limited or different levels of familiarity, were these recent endorsements by people like Tom York and Stephen Malkmus surprising?
For me, the Jara one was the most surprising one.
Shocking.
That I like that it's a backhanded compliment at least.
Yeah, I know.
And also crazy that he has a 12-year-old daughter. Can you imagine being a 12-year-old girl with Michael Jara as your dad?
I really cannot.
But that one was incredibly surprising to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dave Grohl, Billy Joe Armstrong, those aren't too surprising, I suppose. I think I was a little more surprised, obviously, by like Tom York and even Stephen Malkmus for that matter. It's I guess you rarely hear about these sorts of people talking about the biggest pop star, like rising pop star on the planet. So I was pretty surprised. Made me want to dig a little bit deeper into what Billie Eilish is about rather than just the music.
Yeah, me too, because it's a different thing. Because it'd be one thing if they just like took their kids to the concerts or maybe even said nice things when asked or something. But it feels like, Tom York specifically and Michael Jura went out of their way to publicize their feelings, and their kind of strong feelings. I mean, stronger in the case of Tom York. But that I found very surprising and did, in fact, make me extremely curious. So, having spent the last 2 weeks diving deep into this record, let's try to describe the sound. We can go one by one, but I want to talk about the lyrics. I want to talk about her whole aesthetic. Let's try to describe this thing.
Yeah, I mean, the sound, she's got like very whispery vocals a lot of time. What is that shit everybody like?
ASMR.
Yeah. I'm too old.
There's a cover of the whole album online. You could check it out.
Oh, wow. Really? Yeah, I don't think I've ever actually listened to any of that. But
it creeps me the fuck out. I actually hate it.
Yeah, I couldn't get past like the first song.
Yeah.
There was that Super Bowl commercial that was like, I don't know if you remember that. Like, it was like some beer company or something.
That's
I don't know.
where I first first really heard about it.
Yeah, I hate that shit. Anyway, go on, Dan.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't want to listen to people whisper, but the sound. She's got these whispery vocals. It's like the production. It's sort of hard to describe. It's like kind of lush. Like there's a lot of it, but it's not overdone. But just big. Like I don't know. It's really hard to put into words. I really can't think of it. But like you sort of alluded to, there's a sort of goth thing going throughout, which I think is evident, just from the record cover and even sort of the title. But yeah, it's sort of, and you kind of said this personally, Gabe, but I'll steal it. It's kind of like a palatable like next step of something like XXX Tentacion.
Yeah, like a SoundCloud rap kind of without the rapping. I mean, you said lush, but it's like, it is, but it's also kind of shockingly minimalist, wouldn't you say, Darren?
Yeah, I was going to kind of add that, like, I feel like a lot of the tracks are kind of like bare minimum with just a few like layers added on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think of like Wish You Were Gay, it's very like minimal, just a guitar. And then there's a couple of things like kind of layered on top of it. And I feel like a lot of these songs, you can kind of identify that initial like foundation, and then some just like little flourishes, little things added on, but pretty much like, it's very like, it's pretty bass heavy, a lot of the tracks are pretty bass heavy, I think that's kind of goes along with the sort of darker aesthetic, right?
Yeah. And, it's like, in keeping with the ASMR whispery type vibe, it's like, there's a lot of silence, like a crazy amount of silence, where songs will just literally like stop. Right. And
she's like whispering almost, yeah.
Yeah, or I mean, she'll even like just take a breath or something, and it's just, there's no sound, and then it'll be like the softest, quietest thing. And then it does get it feels quite grand, especially on those like big choruses. All the choruses feel really big and like sing-along-able, despite being minimal, you know what I mean, Dan?
Yeah, exactly. That's like, that's what I was kind of getting at, like the production. The production is like almost the star of the record.
Yes,
here. And yeah, he it's like her brother that does most of the production, right? Phineas, yeah. He does like a really good job of like towing that line between like minimalism and sort of maximalism. Just like. I don't know. That was definitely the star of the show there for me.
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions about that. I think one place I want to start is the influences, which I find really fascinating because, I basically jotted a lot of stuff down. I'm sure it occurred to you guys, but there's a strong Lorde influence here, in the sense of it's like kind of trap meets indie pop or something. I mean, when we talk about like bass heavy and a lot of empty space and stuff, I mean, that is like the trap MO. And a lot of times there are these kind of like tinkling hi-hats and stuff, and even claps sometimes, very trap sounding. And that reminded me so much of Lorde, and her voice sounds a lot like Lorde. I also jotted stuff down like the XX, which is like famously, minimalist kind of pop. And there are a couple songs actually toward like the latter half. I think of like Elo Milo and maybe that song 8 a little bit, where there's like kind of really sparse like high guitar notes with some reverb on them and stuff, and it just makes me think so much of the XX. I think of like FKA Twigs, which was this kind of like dark, moody, minimalist R&B, Lana Del Rey, stuff like, we talked about the SoundCloud rap and stuff. And so basically, and I think there's a lot of like Bon Iver and a lot of early James Blake. I think I'll have stuff to reference about that later on. Yeezus, I feel a lot of influence on.
Yeah, for sure.
With the,
definitely.
Like, the distorting vocals, and that kind of like overlaps with the Bon Iver thing with like the pitch shifted vocals and stuff. And there's even this song "Bury a Friend" that's like the beat of Black Skinhead, like quite literally, with like even a scream sound in between. So basically, my overall question is, all of this shit is from like 2010 to 2013, basically. Why is this popular all of a sudden now?
I think we're just a little far enough away from it where it's like a little mild nostalgia look back at those kind of things. It's good because you got to think. Eilish, she's 17, so she was like a
grew
kid.
Up.
Yeah, she like maybe like sort of grew up hearing those things. Especially if her brother is like the producer of this. I think he's older than her. He probably was into Bon Iver, maybe Yeezus, stuff like that. She heard it. He played it for it, whatever, I think that's why. I think we're getting like a little mini nostalgia trip here.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's 4 years older than her, is what I've read, and she had even said that he basically was like downloading music and giving that and feeding it to her, at a young age and everything. So kind of exactly what you were describing there, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, he would have been the perfect age back then for, growing up with those kinds of things,
Yeah, I mean, that is actually interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I was wondering, and maybe this is impossible, but it's like, I guess I don't know how popular a lot of that stuff actually was, and I wonder if it just took, like 7-8 years for it actually to kind of fully reach the mainstream. Do you think there's any chance of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's kind of where I think this conversation is going to get to, right? Because what we have now, what was then in like 2010, 2011 has now sort of been bottled up, maybe processed a little bit, packaged for a certain generation and a certain audience. And here we have the final product, which is Billie Eilish. Now, we'll get into this, but I don't necessarily think that she is just 100% a manufactured product, but I definitely think there is elements of that at play.
I get what you mean. Like those sounds that came organically to people like Bon Iver, Kanye and stuff, like maybe now they've been distilled and brought into the mainstream a little bit.
Well, and they're also not like a 17-year-old girl. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, exactly.
They're not getting placed on Ellen and all of these particular places, getting put out in the spotlight like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's like the XX weren't like a huge presence on Instagram or whatever, the way that Billie Eilish is,
right.
And that just kind of brings it to a whole new audience that maybe never heard it, and stuff like it's surprising really, but stuff like early James Blake, I mean, is genuinely very weird, like to the point where I feel like I've heard it kind of slowly working its way into music via like people like Frank Ocean and stuff like that. But I guess I wrestled with this all week. Like, is this just finally the explosion of that kind of sound that had been sort of building and developing for a while, or maybe even the commercialization of that sound? But I do think I kind of like that, Dan, actually, that it might actually not be so calculated. It might be just this is what they grew up on and what they really like. I also wanted to ask, you brought it up, Dan, and another thing I wrestled with is like, is there something cheap about the production? Because I was very, very surprised. In general, I was surprised by the sound of this record. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting.
Same.
The whole like the super whispery vocals I thought were like, I was kind of like stunned by, because it was like a level of intimacy I had not like really heard vocally. And I thought that was actually quite interesting, because you think about something like, in the 90s, you get people like Elliott Smith and stuff who are like really kind of whispering into your ear. And it was like really, really an interesting development in music. And now it feels even closer somehow than maybe it just wasn't technically possible to sound so close to your ear. So that surprised me. I was also surprised by the kind of neo-soul vibe of this. I mean, she sings kind of like Billie Holiday a lot. And I'm not just saying that because they're both named Billie, but there's like a slightly jazzy kind of way. And there's songs on here like I think of All the Good Girls Go to Hell. They have kind of like a plinking piano thing that's very like Amy Winehouse or something. And so basically a lot of these songs are quite they would be kind of like your normal I don't know, like a kind of a normal standard like sweet little pop tune, and yet they're always made more interesting by like distorting basses and like vocals that are just clipping out of recognition.
Right.
Does that feel like, cheap? Do you kind of get what I'm asking?
Yeah, I get you. I don't think that it's cheap. I mean, is using any trick, in any type of music, does that make it cheap just because it's like sort of a little trick, Because I think like the third song, Zanny, that song, it's pretty good, but I think the best part about it is like when she's singing the like chorus and it's like clipping so hard that it's it's like cutting out her vocals and stuff. And I actually read on like Genius, she said that she wanted it to sound like the way like when you're in like a shitty smelling like secondhand smoke filled room, and so I think tricks like that, like without that sort of trick in that song, I think it just would have been another kind of meh song.
Doesn't that like give you pause or something? Like, because it would be sort of a normal song, and then they sort of add these. I think about something like that song in particular reminds me of XXXTentacion, right? Like his "Look at Me, Fuck at Me" song, and it's like. Distorting like crazy. And this is true of a lot of SoundCloud rap. And the thing is that that's sort of coming out of necessity, because it's low quality. It's really budget. That's
it's a lack of like knowing how to record things too.
Yeah, but also like a lack of like access to professional equipment and stuff like that. And so here, what you've basically got is somebody who likes that sound and is creating it on like, the nicest equipment possible. And just kind of maybe dressing up an average song to make it more like interesting.
I get your point, but like think about like the 90s, like you mentioned, like Elliott Smith and stuff, when the lo-fi thing sort of became like a little bit of a big thing, and then more popular things started sort of copying and like purposely making things sound lo-fi that weren't. I mean, is it a little cheap?
See, for my whole life, I felt very conflicted about this. Darren, we've argued about it a lot, actually, in our youth, because you think of something like Neutral Milk Hotel, right? Like on Two-Headed Boy, when the mic is distorting, it feels like, you feel like, okay, it's a low-quality mic, and it's just such a passionate take that they went with the one that distorted, But then I'm listening to like the microphones for the first time back in those days, too. And there's similar lo-fi tricks, and I'm thinking like, that's a choice, actually. Like he didn't need, he's softly singing and it's distorting. He chose to do that. And I felt really conflicted. Like it's like appropriating lo-fi. You know what I'm saying?
I mean,
Darren?
I felt like you always hated it early on. I think you were
early on I really, but my whole life I felt kind of like, sort of, I just have a hang up with people who like fake lo-fi, but
I mean, think of like just guitar distortion. Like that's originally from when people played amps too loud and they would distort, and then someone figured out, man, that sounds fucking cool. Let me figure out how to purposely do it, and then now literally every band ever like has a distortion pedal,
right?
So it's sort of the same thing, like just because somebody found it organically and then somebody else liked it and wanted to make that sound, it's like if you hear just some sound on a record and you want to make a similar sound on your record, is that cheap because you didn't stumble upon it, organically?
Yeah, I mean, what do you think, Darren? Did any of the production tricks strike you as cheap on this Billie Eilish record?
I mean, it really didn't. Early on when I was listening to the record, I was a little underwhelmed, I guess, by the record entirely. Upon like reading a bit more on the production of it all, and because with these pop stars, I'm always like interested in like, okay, what role did they play in the songwriting and all of that. So to learn that like she was collaborating with her brother, who was a little bit older, who also had a band, it made me like rethink a lot of the songs and like what his part probably was in a lot of these songs. And I feel like he's sort of the mastermind behind a lot of these, what you're calling tricks, what I would say are nice, accents to the song, and that actually make the songs a little more interesting than like if they weren't there, kind of like what Dan was describing.
Yeah, I think accents is a much better word than tricks. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I recognize that it sounds stupid to say like, production is a trick or something, because that's really important. Like if you played all of the songs from, I don't know, Yeezus on an acoustic guitar,
yeah, it sound like shit.
Lame. Yeah.
Or I mean,
yeah,
or if it was like remixed by somebody and made to sound cleaner and not as distorted in certain places. I mean, that would have a significant impact on the whole sound of the record.
Yeah, it was just something like I found myself thinking about, because I was thinking about like Elliott Smith. It was his 50th birthday would have been his 50th birthday a couple of days ago, and I found myself thinking about the kind of indie aesthetic that I think is all over this Billie Eilish record, and how a lot of that starts with people like Elliott Smith. And Elliott Smith is sort of making music very cheaply early in his career, in a bedroom, you can tell, and he's basically like embracing the quiet, hushed, lo-fi sound. And then you can see that once he starts to sort of get money and stuff and a major label deal, he really abandons it, because his like vision was bigger, and he's like, why would I make it sound like shit? I don't have to anymore. And so it just kind of rubs me like in a weird way whenever somebody like this major label, massive selling, pop star is like kind of, like I said, sort of appropriating the lo-fi aesthetic. Would you guys describe this as an indie record?
I mean, it's on Interscope, so.
But I mean, in sound, in genre,
I mean, I just don't know what that means anymore. Like indie, sort of like it. People try to still think of it as like this little cool people club, but it's not that anymore. Like indie is like the dominant rock force nowadays, And so like, does it sound like other, quote unquote indie things? Like, yeah, sure. But it's not this little cool club anymore.
Yeah, what do you think, Darren?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think I can describe it as indie. I think indie goes beyond what we're trying to describe here. Goes a little bit beyond just the sound of the record, and I can't help but unite the appearance and the style and the mainstream, major pop record label, having an impact here. You know what I mean? And I think that the sound quality, yes, there are some of these accents like we are sort of talking about. But I mean, this still sounds like a major pop star sort of record, like when I think of Lorde, I don't think of Lorde's records as like being an indie record. You know what I mean?
But I think a lot of people do.
To me, like Lorde's records, they always struck me as like kind of indie in sound, indie in approach a little bit, and it was like a major success. This has that feel to me too, because it sounds stupid, but things like the intro track. Are just kind of like playful silliness. She's joking about taking her Invisalign, braces thing out and being able to start the record, and they're just laughing. And there are a couple tracks that sort of like end with, studio chuckles and stuff like that, inside jokes. And you get the sense that this is like a brother and a sister who know each other really well and have a lot of fun making music together in a bedroom. It just so happens that this bedroom is in a multi-million-dollar mansion and has like, the nicest equipment you could ever buy, but it has that vibe. And the songs, when I think of stuff like the song 8 that has like this ukulele on it, sort of pitch shifted vocals, that's kind of like the indie free spirit. I feel like, now you could argue that this is like indie going peak mainstream in a way, but I feel like it really sounds more like an indie record than, let's say, an Ariana Grande record.
Sure. But can we agree that maybe it occupies a space in between? You know what I mean? like, have you guys have listened to? I never can say it right, but Sky Ferreira, whatever. I feel like she belongs in that like sort of indie pop realm, whereas Katy Perry is like obviously very much on the other side of the spectrum, and then here we have Billie Eilish. I feel like somewhere kind of in between all of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. Like there's this sort of in-between pop world now. Like, in the days when we were growing up, you had the regular rock radio, and then you had the alt-rock radio. There's sort of like, this is like the alt-pop kind of thing now.
That's what people are calling it, yeah.
Like Sky Fiera is a good example of that. Lorde, I think, fits sort of in there. Because, this isn't like your Katy Perry's, your Ariana Grande's and stuff. That is like big-time, radio, I don't want to use the word bubblegum, but like...
Yeah. Well, see, I think anybody would agree, but like, can you put your finger on why? Like, what is different from this?
I think just because the like... media is like so fractured now. There's so many, you had 4 radio channels or whatever, and those were the music you could listen to, unless you lived in a big city or wanted to buy a ton of records. Now, you don't have that. So people that like, they're sort of in this in between. They don't really want the sugary sweet bubblegum pop, but they don't want Pearl Jam or whatever. This sort of like fits a space sort of in the middle. That it's palatable, it's listenable, it's easy to get into, but also there's, if you can dig a little deeper into it, there's a little bit of production and stuff that's not on your standard everyday pop record.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't imagine Katy Perry ever singing or being a part of a record like this, like, at all.
No, exactly. Like could you imagine like you brought up 8, like could you imagine like Katy Perry like pitching her vocals or something like that, it just wouldn't happen. And I think like this, there has become this space in between the mainstream and the underground, and things like this are where it lays. It's sort of like the pitchfork land now,
Yeah, that's true, actually. I mean, yeah, so the thing is that this, however, is a massive success, right? So it might actually be, and I want to return to this later, but this might be the thing that sort of kills off the Katy Perrys and stuff like that. This might be the sound to come or something, but it is really a dominant cultural force, and I think she's the first, I hope I have this right, she's the first person born after the year 2000 to have a #1 album on the Billboard charts, which is really interesting. But it's a massive seller. So we've kind of been like leading toward my next question, and maybe you feel like we've already answered it. But when Tom York says, you're the only one doing anything fucking interesting nowadays, like, what does he mean by nowadays? Does Billie Eilish really stand out that much?
I think he has to mean like in the pop world, like,
yeah,
right,
for sure.
Right.
I don't know. When people say like things like that, it just makes me think you're an old fucking boomer. Like, nothing's been good since Bonham died. I kind of really hate those sort of statements in general. But I mean, I think she does.
But does she stand out?
Yeah, I think she does stand out. I think Lorde sort of like maybe is the first like big one to make this like to make a mark with this like sort of alt pop thing. But I feel like Eilish is sort of like taken that a step further, like you never saw Lorde on all these like TV shows. Eilish did that Hot Ones show, and so Lorde's not doing those sort of like these are big like cultural things right now. That are sort of also not the mainstream, like Hot Ones is like a great example of this.
Like YouTube is still not like a YouTube show, even though it gets more views than like even most late night shows or whatever. It's not considered like real TV or something.
No, exactly. It's like a guy in a room with just a black curtain. He handed him a laptop. He's got to log into it.
Right.
Like it's sort of like got this underground like feel to it, even though, like you said, it probably gets more people watch that than they watch the Tonight Show or watch any TV show. So I think it's just we're just moving into a new world.
Yeah. So what do you think, Darren? Do you think she stands out in the current like pop landscape?
Yeah, I think so. And I think Tom is talking about like in general, like what are the biggest pop stars today, the Ariana Grandes, even like the Miley Cyruses, right? Like
Right.
Billie Eilish is quickly, and if not already, become that big of a name, like a household name.
Right.
And she's doing something different than all of those people. Taylor Swift, everyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, did you guys listen to any of her, like, early stuff by chance?
I listened to just the song Ocean Eyes because I knew you wanted to talk about it. Yeah.
So, I mean, didn't it strike you as, like, it's just like kind of your run-of-the-mill YouTube sensation? It's extremely Lana Del Rey.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine. There are a lot of young artists or whatever who just like love Lana Del Rey or whatever, and they make songs on YouTube. This obviously has higher production values, but what I'm wondering is, like, when you listen to this record, I mean, her debut record, because I also listened to her EP that precedes this, and I found it, Ocean Eyes is on it, and I found it similarly, like, anonymous. It was kind of just like any YouTuber sort of, and there were some catchy songs, but here, did it strike you as like this is a distinct voice? Because I found myself like wrestling with this because I kept thinking about all the influences, which I think are so in your face, and yet did you feel like this is the sound of Billie Eilish? This is a distinct personality and sound and voice.
Kind of not, because like you said, you can see the influences so like heavily, but also, there's always sort of like that artist that like in a generation or whatever that like takes the influences and all of previous times, melds it into something new, and then bam, we've got it. Like the Ramones. Like the Ramones sound like the Ramones, but really they're just like bringing back 50s rock and roll. Like it sounds very actually similar to that, just played a little less well. And it like this sort of almost feels, I mean, I'm not saying she's as good as the Ramones, but like no hate mail, but it sort of feels like that, like she's just like, I don't know, it's hard to put into words, but like she doesn't, like, it doesn't seem wholly original, but it's not like a carbon copy either,
putting her own spin on her influences.
Yeah, it's like melding like influences that like maybe typically don't go together. So like now you're forming something new,
Yeah, I struggled with this because, I think she has a nice voice. I think she sings well. I imagine you probably hate that, Gabe, but
No, I mean, it didn't. It struck me as like sometimes I really think it could be the Lord singer, and I wouldn't know that you would swap them out. But for the most part, I felt like it wasn't just your average anonymous, like, good singer.
Right, but I don't know if, like, people like Ariana Grande, Taylor Swift, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, like, if you could put any instrument, play any music, you would probably be able to tell their voices apart, right? Her, Billie Eilish, I feel like there's more to it. Like, you couldn't just rely solely on her vocal. If you put on the song like Bad Guy, there's the vocal, there's the music, there's the image that kind of gets, into your head about that. I think all of that is like, oh, that's Billie Eilish. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if
it's like a package deal.
Yeah. I'm having a hard time describing it, but that's kind of what I'm getting at.
I mean, I guess that is like a pop staple, and we didn't really talk about it that much, so we should try to describe a little bit more about like the lyrics and the general aesthetic here. Did you guys watch some of those music videos or anything like that?
I watched the Bad Guy one because I had seen like a lot of pictures, like it gets like memed a little bit, like her riding in those little cars and stuff. So I realized I had seen a bunch of pictures from that, but I did watch that video, and it was like a pretty cool video, and I feel like it did like set like a tone for her aesthetic and everything. Like Darren said, it like really like sort of becomes this package deal. And I normally nowadays, music videos are just kind of, if you're a really big fan, you'll watch them. But I feel like with her like that, I think at least that one's like sort of worth seeing.
Yeah, but you don't think that's like just standard for pop? Like that's kind of always been with pop. You gotta see how they dress and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I didn't really think about that. But yeah, that actually is sort of a good point.
How would you describe the aesthetic, Darren?
Yeah, so I've seen the Bad Guy video, and I kind of was like put off by it because I just didn't feel like it linked up as well with like what I sort of envisioned with the music. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I guess because it's just so whispery and like relatively like dark, and that's just not what I'm like seeing in the in the video.
Yeah,
It's a little more fun.
The video, the video's like a little like goofy. But I thought that worked because, and I don't want to get too far away, but like there's a little bit of goofy stuff on this record, you know, like it's not straight, you know, got like that My Strange Addiction has like just samples of The Office for like seemingly no reason.
I know.
You know, like there's some goofy
and like
stuff
the whole
in it.
song "Bad Guy" with like
The duh.
I'm the steal your dad type and stuff like that. You know, there's like a fun playfulness, and that video is very you know, quite fun and playful, especially like that really catchy high synth line, you know, and she's like kind of dancing around. But the ending of that song is like, I think, kind of awesomely dark all of a sudden, you know, that like outro thing.
Nice switch.
And in the video it's actually like quite creepy. She's like sitting on a guy who's doing push-ups.
Yeah,
and of course
that's a bit more of what I was sort of envisioning.
Yeah. And if you watch, you know, like the Bury a Friend video, it's basically like a horror, like a short horror film, and like, you know, it's really a lot closer to like Nine Inch Nails' Closer video than anything fun. And if you watch When the Party's Over, it's very, you know, it really reminds me kind of another influence I feel like I spot, especially in her aesthetic, Tyler, the Creator, or Odd Future in general, speaking of 2010 again, where it's basically just her and she's sitting in like an all white room, and there's like a glass of like black liquid, and she drinks it, and then like black liquid just starts like sort of streaming from her eyes, and like that's the whole video. Much darker and horror. So Darren, like, you sense the fun, but sometimes it gets very, like, I don't know, melodramatic teen girl, do you think?
Yeah, and, you know, this is kind of where, you know, you wonder, I don't know. I mean, I find it, I guess you have to, like, you think about, like, authenticity and, like, you know, is she being genuine and stuff? And, like, from everything I've seen, everything I've read, I mean, I feel like this is truly, like, this is, like, her, you know what I mean? Like, she's just into this sort of, like, you know, weirdness and trying to, like, put a lot of things on, you know, upside down on its head or whatever, you know, whatever you may think of, like, what a pop star 17-year-old should be. You know, I think that Ringer article that you shared was really interesting because it kind of mentions, like, Britney Spears was, like, the same exact age at the time of when she became big. And, like, think of the difference between... Yeah, think of the difference between Britney Spears in that, like, school uniform and Billie Eilish. You know what I mean? Like, they don't even belong in the same, like, universe, basically. And when you watch her interviews, you read like what she's saying and stuff. I mean, she's talking about, like, she's saying, like, very clearly, like, you know, fuck Invisalign, fuck the, you know, like, she'll just say it. And, you know, to me, if that was happening, if Britney Spears was saying something like that back in the 90s, you know, the record executives would be, like, going nuts if somebody was, like, just saying something like that. So,
okay. I think it feels a little genuine. You know, like I watched her, or tried to watch her Over Under on Pitchfork, and it was very hard to watch. It was, like, sort of embarrassing. But then I remember, like, oh yeah, she's 17. I would have had a fucking embarrassing Over Under at 17 too. True. You know, like, she sort of just seemed like, I didn't know Britney Spears was the same age, and that's nuts. But you know, like, Britney Spears, like, sort of does seem manufactured and whatnot. But, like, that, I mean, we were sort of like her, where, you know, you were like, you know, you like Nine Inch Nails and Tool and stuff, you know, and you were like trying to be different and cool and whatnot, you know, and maybe it's slightly embarrassing about it, you know. So I think, like, it feels like her genuine personality to me.
Yeah, I mean, it feels appropriate for her age for sure. I think that sometimes it gets really melodramatic, especially, like, lyrically. Her aesthetic, you know, it feels like the kind of, you know, the bleeding and, like, the horror tropes and stuff are all some, like, sort of metaphor for what it feels like to be a teenager. And it feels like so over the top. It's kind of like this Euphoria show on HBO or whatever, where it's like a super amplified version of, you know, like, regular teenage shit, probably, you know, boys breaking up with you or whatever and feeling depressed and stuff. But I guess what we're kind of groping toward, because I think we can just jump around, because basically I wanted to talk about why is she getting so much hype? Why is she getting so much critical acclaim, so much, like, respect from, like, these high caliber artists? But really, I feel like some of that defense of her is actually a response to the backlash to Billie Eilish. And we've been kind of groping toward the backlash. And I guess we should just jump into the, industry plant discussion here, which is like something that people just seem like they always want to talk about when it comes to Billie Eilish. Now, you guys were talking about it feeling genuine. You were talking about Britney Spears. I mean, maybe you could use Britney Spears as an example. How would you define what people want to say an industry plant is?
It's like something. Britney Spears maybe is a harder example. I think of something like NSYNC, Backstreet Boys. Like, that's not a band that, like, a lot of, when you think of a band, you think of like some kids that got together in high school and, they played some bars and then somebody discovered them and then they got a label and whatnot. NSYNC is like somebody, that Lou Pearlman guy was like, I got an idea. I'll make this band of 5 attractive, boys. One will be the bad boy, one will be the sweet guy. And then so he goes out and he audition, JT's on the team, whoever else got on, and like that's formulated, like that band didn't exist until a powerful record executive decided it should exist because he saw a market for it and wanted to make millions and millions of dollars, and it worked. That's sort of what I think of when I think of like a legitimate industry plant.
I mean, like Britney Spears too, because it's kind of like, in fact, did you know, Darren? I didn't know this, but and maybe I'm fucking this up, but if I remember correctly, Robin was supposed to be like this hot new pop artist by this whatever this management company is. And she was like being too weird. And so they like, put their hopes from her onto this young girl, Britney Spears, to try to make her into like the next big thing. And so that's kind of like Robin went her own way and, Britney Spears went hers. But it does feel like there were a bunch of label execs and they were like, Britney Spears, let's put her in a schoolgirl outfit.
Yes, and let's tie it up so we can see her midriff just a little bit.
Yeah,
that's
that wasn't like an expression of her personality necessarily.
Exactly.
So what would you add to like this industry plant definition, Darren?
Yeah. So, exactly kind of what you guys are saying, like a room full of suits who are trying to basically manufacture big hits. They hire, the best songwriters and the best producers and all of this stuff to literally, and then all they need the person for like an image, right? Mm-hmm. And Robin's a good example. I mean, Robin had a pretty big hit in the 90s before she disappeared, and I guess this is kind of the time that you're talking about, Gabe.
Right.
And she completely fell off the radar and came back in like 2010, right? I mean, that was a long time.
Right.
You look at like Sky Ferreira's, whatever. She talks about this like on her album. Like she talks about how like basically record executives telling her to be sexier and to, wear certain clothing and stuff, and she sort of rejects that. And where is she now? I mean, that's that, whatever. Yeah. But like industry plant by definition to me is like, record executives deciding on what they believe is going to be trendy, having like market research, doing all of this, spending all sorts of money to create an image and then placing the right person in that image.
Selling it.
Yeah.
And, so when it comes to Billie Eilish, there's all that stuff. There's also the added qualifier, it seems to be, of an industry plant where you have the only reason you became the face was because you had some kind of connections in the first place, so her parents are, I don't know, they're like actors, like not famous really, but they've had small roles in like popular stuff like The West Wing and I don't know, Baskets and stuff like that. But her brother was on Glee, I guess, and so she certainly got a leg up. But in your guys' words, why are people calling Billie Eilish an industry plant?
I think what you just said, like having the connections, like seems a little suspicious and stuff. But Anthony Fantano did a like video about Eilish being an industry plant, and I thought he like really like explained it well. Like basically anyone that's famous is famous because they have some sort of connection. That's just the way the world works, There's so many.
Yeah.
Think of how many people personally that have a band. Everybody's had a band at some point in their life, and then how many of those not only like make money but become like hugely famous. Most of the, I mean, like even Fantano even mentions like the Beatles, like the Beatles were sort of like they happened to meet Brian Epstein and Epstein like sort of molds them into this image, but pushes them a certain way, and then that's why they become this huge band and everything. So like,
I mean, so there's definitely that, but there's like, it feels a little different because you could say something like, okay, yes, you get a lucky break by like making the right friend or impressing the right person or whatever. But then it feels like, what do you do with that lucky break, right? So like somebody like Nirvana, it doesn't feel like they compromised once they got their
Nirvana's
shot.
a bad example because they are like one of those few that like really did just like make it from nothing.
Well, but I mean, like a lot. There's a lot. There's people like, I mean, there's just like countless artists where it's not like they were totally compromised by, okay, if you want your shot, you got to totally change your image or something like that. Like I feel like there are a lot of artists that were kind of bold and uncompromising. We tend to celebrate those and we acknowledge like, hey, they got a lucky break, and look what they did with it. Whereas there are other people who, it just feels like, mass market appeal or something. Like really, they get their lucky shot because they're willing to play along, and then otherwise you end up like this Sky, and I can't say her last name either, Darren, so don't feel bad. Where you're just totally shut out. But I mean, so basically, what I thought of when I thought of an industry plant, I guess I think that the whole industry plant thing is in some ways bogus, in some ways not bogus. So, in one sense, I can't, people like, because Fantano, he talks about like the Beatles and the Clash and stuff, and people who actually were kind of like groomed, and then of course the Beatles kind of like took it and ran with it in their own direction. But as being an example of an industry plant, I got a much better example of an industry plant, which is like Sean Lennon or like Damian Marley. Yeah. What could be a greater industry plant than that? And yet, have you ever felt like, oh, Sean Lennon shouldn't be allowed to make music?
No, exactly. Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. Like. And maybe Sean Lennon is a bad example because he didn't like, who's actually a better example, Julian Lennon, who in the 80s had like a couple sort of minor hits, and they're really trash. And they really do sort of like reek of that, like, my dad's John Lennon. We can sell this, whatever. So yeah, Sean Lennon, I think he's like gone his own, like he has like some weird band with Les Claypool now, like he's not exactly like trying to,
but even then, even like Julian, like, I mean, you would like, why not? Why shouldn't he be allowed to make a record if he wants to make a record,
No, but I think like someone like Julian Lennon, like, I don't know if you've ever listened to his record, but I have tried, and that the record would not have been made if his last name was something different. It's not very good. But yeah, I get what you mean. Like, I mean, why shouldn't he be allowed to? And there's people like the Wallflowers, like that's Bob Dylan's son.
Yeah,
and he doesn't really.
Well, I think of like Kurt Cobain's daughter, Frances Bean.
Yeah,
like,
like,
even if there's like a minor talk about her creating an album, like there's article after article.
Yeah,
and what's
exactly.
really interesting is that those articles, they title it like Kurt Cobain's daughter, not
Frances Bean Cobain. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean,
so I mean, the question is like, let's say that Billie Eilish got a leg up because she has some kind of industry connections, and it certainly is. There's something a little suspicious about the fact that like her breakthrough song is Ocean Eyes, which sounds as professionally produced as her debut album here does. So maybe they're just rich.
Yeah, I mean,
her brother, but he makes all the music and stuff like that. It's not like they have a team of songwriters like you were mentioning, Darren. But is it? You kind of already touched on it, Darren, but is this like kind of her, or is this a label exec like giving her a leg up and selling us a Billie Eilish that we want to see?
So here's my thoughts. Like, and I've thought about this so much, to answer the question directly, like, do I think Billie Eilish is an industry plant? I would say no, but there is no doubt in my mind that there is not a room full of suits, record executives, right, that are strategizing behind the image of Billie Eilish. Because look at all of the places that she's been. 17 magazine, Ellen, the Ellen show. She's everywhere. Even Pitchfork. I mean, these are, Billie Eilish is not like reaching out directly to these people and trying to get on there. No, there is somebody behind the scenes that is putting her out there, and like, this is what happens when you get on a major label. I mean, look, you mentioned Nirvana as an example of not at all being an industry plant, but they got a lot more airplay on the radio because they signed on to Geffen Records. You know what I mean? They got their videos played on MTV.
And that's
so
why
saw it.
That's why you sign on a major label.
And they didn't compromise their image or their sound, because what they were doing was what people were already, like, they were ready for it. They were relating to it. But somebody has to get it out there. Billie Eilish, she, the way she dresses, her sort of style, her thoughts on like, oh, I'm not, I'm going to wear baggy clothing because I don't want people to judge me and stuff, or, people shouldn't care about it, whatever. That's a sentiment that is shared. That's a big thing right now. We all know about that, right? And so you take that, you bottle it up, and you find all the right avenues, YouTube, all of these places, so that it can get out there, and then people latch onto it.
Yeah, I think that's completely perfect, Aaron. Like that's exactly how I feel. Like, yeah, she's signed to a major label, so yeah, there is a room of suits behind her. Because there's a room of suits behind
it. There's money involved.
There's a room of suits behind any of those people.
What I want to know is, like, I'm fine with that as long as it's genuine. So sometimes, like, it feels a little pandering, when she puts, like, for reasons I really cannot understand, why the clips from The Office are on that one song. It feels a little bit like, all of, like, the young kids today, they binge watch The Office on Netflix. It's like a shared cultural language they have. And so you think, like, okay, there are a couple options here. One, Billie Eilish, like, just loves The Office, and she happens to be a lot like a lot of people in her generation.
She does.
And
she does. Apparently.
So she puts it there. Two, that's true or not, but it doesn't matter because she knows that a lot of her listeners will really get a kick out of that, and so she adds it. Three, some suit says, could you put an Office reference on this? Because it gives us, like, we see that our audience really likes that. At the end of the day, is there even a difference between those three things? And would it bother you if it was kind of a Suits decision?
If it's a Suits decision, then that's a little stupid, but I don't think it is. Like you said, it's sort of a shared cultural language of her age group, like people that age, the Office is their Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. And when I was 15 making shitty songs, on my computer, I put Star Wars samples in them and stuff because I fucking liked Star Wars, and I thought it would be cool to have a Star Wars sample. But that's why I did it. Just the difference is no one heard mine, and we're hearing hers.
Well, and there's a mixture here, right? Because according to 17.com in the article I read that said 10 reasons why you'll be more obsessed with Billie Eilish. One of those reasons was that she loves The Office, right?
Right.
So, okay,
right.
So she genuinely loves The Office, but who's paying for the rights to be able to put The Office on this major record,
That is something a little weird because it's like a very indie thing to kind of like sample something that you like, on there, on your album, but she must have paid a lot of money, or
Absolutely.
her label did, to have that. So it's kind of like a funny exposure of like, this feels indie, but it's not really. But, it's not just that. It feels like all of her lyrics they're really kind of like, I don't know, there's a lot of like sad girl shit, a lot of like, kind of clever, witty shit. And it feels just very fitting to be like the caption on an Instagram photo or a Tumblr post, and so then you start to like wonder, is this just how she thinks because she grew up on Instagram? Or is she like consciously thinking, or is somebody consciously asking her to, or her brother to write lyrics that people will share on Instagram? It goes beyond The Office to just be like, are the lyrics calculated? Is the image calculated? Like, you start to like have doubt about everything almost.
Think about when we were this age. Everybody, you'd take your favorite emo lyric and make it your away message on AIM.
Right. And actually, I was thinking about like in our youth, we had LiveJournal, and I felt like a lot of emo bands were specifically writing to be quoted on LiveJournal.
Like the title of a LiveJournal entry. Yeah.
Deliberately, I think they were.
Yeah, all those like screamo hardcore bands. Yeah, like all the titles were some long, like, rambling LiveJournal title. Yeah. But that was just like, I don't think that, most of those bands weren't on like some major label. I think it was just like that was the culture at the time. The culture now is posting stuff on Instagram, having like a little.
So she's got her like
quote. Because
she's got her finger on the culture, or she's just expressing her true feelings, or
I think it's hard for us to look at it because we're all in our 30s. If we, you are now
just called out,
but
he's not ready yet. Okay, he's just
he just joined the club, but yeah, like maybe it feels calculated to us because we're not doing that. We're not posting our favorite lyrics on Instagram, but we fucking were when we were 17. We all did it on LiveJournal, on MySpace, on AIM.
I know, but do the calculation, like, Darren, do you feel like that's calculated, and would it bother you if it was?
Like, what do I think is calculated? Like,
like she's writing like with the intent of people sharing this on Instagram. You know, like that's, you know,
I mean, like
weird?
I think Phineas, her brother, I think that's kind of part of his role, right? I can imagine, and this is obviously just total speculation, but like, you know, Billie comes up with a song called Wish You Were Gay. You know, she maybe have just written a little something on the guitar. And right. I think that Phineas sort of formulates that so that it would fit, and maybe it would be something, you know, so that it would work in a way that, yes, it would be like great for an Instagram post or whatever. Like, I just think that is part of it. But I truly believe that most of this is truly genuine. And that song in particular, I think, is where I go to, because like when I first heard it, I was like, well, this is interesting. This sounds like something like how appropriate for her to be singing something like this right now, right? But when you read into it, you know, it turns out, oh, she wrote this song about a guy, and I guess the guy didn't like her back or something like that, and she just wishes that he was just gay. Like, she wishes that was the reason that she that he
so
didn't
it wouldn't
like her,
damage her ego.
But it kind of changes my perspective on the song, you know.
So where I came down on is like, so yeah, I think it's genuine. I think that, like I mentioned with like Sean Lennon, Julian Lennon, Damian Marley, whatever, like I actually don't care about industry plants. I think a lot of, you know, if depending on how loose your definition of industry plant is, like you mentioned, Dan, a lot of stuff would fall under the umbrella of industry plant, and it just doesn't matter. It just matters what you do with that opportunity. I'm not really like, I don't really care about like how the opportunity came about. And if your music's not good, I think Fantano mentions this, like people are going to forget about you. Yeah. In fact, you know, but then, so let me get a little bit conspiratorial here. Conspiracy Gabe also has some things to say. So you were mentioning this, Darren, but hype is like the label's job, and hype is bullshit because, and they've been doing it from the dawn of time. It's not like a new thing. You know, when you see like an old movie poster or something, and it'll say something like, see the movie everyone's talking about.
That's
you know?
bullshit.
And like nobody was talking about it. Nobody was. But part of the strategy is to get you to think that everybody's talking about it. Like you got to see it.
You don't want to miss out.
Like, they still do this. And I believe, again, Conspiracy Gabe believes that like on Reddit are people paid by
1,000%.
I swear to God. I swear to God. Like, on 4chan, on all this shit. They're on YouTube comments.
They would be literally stupid if they didn't do it. Yeah. You know? It would be stupid not to do it.
You want to create like an organic growth vibe. But yeah, you'd be an idiot not to like try to manipulate that in some way. And so I think we should separate that from Billie Eilish herself. I will agree wholeheartedly that the whole hype machine around her is kind of trying to make her the voice of Generation Z, you know, whatever the fuck they call these kids nowadays. I don't actually know, but
I think that's
it's like, it's trying to make her the voice of her generation. And I think that her music is entirely separate from the way she's being marketed and hyped up. Would you agree with this, Darren?
Yes, I would. And there's a perfect example of this. If you guys have read about it, just recently she had like some sort of fashion line that was like started, and then people on Twitter started blowing up about the fact that the artwork that was on this
I read
shirt
that.
or whatever was actually copied from a fan art of some anime, whatever. And it got to the point, it got blown up so much that she actually backed away from this collaboration entirely because the company that was doing this was truly stealing. But that to me, like, that's different than the Billie Eilish on the record, right? Like she doesn't have complete control, I think, over her image or where she's going at this point. Her name at this point, like, people are this like sort of collaboration. I don't think she had anything to do with it, really.
No, I mean, think about it. Like, you go to Target. I'm sure there's like a Taylor Swift cologne or a perfume or a Rihanna perfume. You think fucking Taylor Swift was like, picking out that's a good smell. You put that in the bottle. Like, no, fucking sniff. She had nothing. It's a little Foley work for you.
Probably not.
She had nothing to do with it. Like, and who cares? Like, there's very few of the, like, Kanye making shoes and clothes and stuff. He's like the only, like, one of the only ones that like is actually doing that.
Yeah, but I mean, even like beyond that stuff, it's like, like that 17 magazine article you talked about, Darren, like her label paid for that. And they probably basically wrote it for the magazine, and like, I just really believe Conspiracy Gabe believes wholeheartedly that like reviews are sometimes purchased.
1,000%.
Comments on message boards are purchased. Like all this shit to make it feel organic, and you've got all these people like that are not real people saying Billie is the voice of a generation. Billie is the voice of a generation. Yeah. She speaks for Gen Z, and then everybody starts to believe it and starts to repeat it. And I think that that's what the backlash is reacting to. The music, we'll get to this in more detail. It's fine. It's like there's no reason to actually hate it, but the hype machine around her, I can kind of sympathize with.
That's literally
the label, not
it's
her.
literally happened since the dawn of music.
Yes.
People used to pay radio DJs to play a song. I work in radio, and every quarter I have to sign a paper saying I won't do that for the government because people did it for
but
so long.
But it's bullshit because there's just a different. The internet gives us different versions of payola. Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
It's back.
Well, and I was going to mention just on a smaller scale. I mean, we've received emails, right, about bands we've never heard of.
Oh yeah,
somebody wanting us to review their record. It wasn't the band. It wasn't anybody in the band. It was some person who represents them. And I mean, that's happening at the smallest level of what do you think is happening with the millions of dollars that are backing
exactly
the image of Billie Eilish.
Yeah, it's weird. And also, a final thought of Conspiracy Gabe is that there is some shady industry plant shit that I think does happen, which is I don't know who was first, honestly, but maybe it was Lil Pump, but racially ambiguous, basically white guys with colorful hair and face tattoos. There are 5 of them,
Takeshi 6ix9ine.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of them, and it's and that has to be just a label being hey, we're kind of looking for our Lil Pump. We'll sign you if you'll dye your hair and get a stupid ass face tattoo, or so, that has to happen. But anyway, I guess, we've been dancing around it, I guess, for a long time. But I mean, is this a good record? Is Billie Eilish's debut record good?
When we had the idea to do this show, I was really dreading having to listen to this album. I thought, you say a 17-year-old girl, pop star. I'm not looking forward to that. But it actually, it was pretty good, it was much better than I thought it would be. Sometimes I had trouble listening to the whole thing at once. It's sort of more palatable in pieces. I think Bad Guy is a really good song. That's one of the best pop songs I've heard in a long time. I really like that track. I think it's pretty good. She's got potential. I would like to, when she gets older, a little more mature, I could do without the sort of jokey thing. I don't need an Office sample in the middle of a song that has nothing to do with it. I with a little maturity and stuff, I think she could be something really great. This could be, Bjork started when she was really young and stuff, and grew into this amazing artist. I could see something like that happening.
So
here.
According to Dan, Billie Eilish next to Ramones, next Bjork, just the highest praise ever.
It has been recorded. He can never change his opinion.
What do you think, Darren?
Yeah, so, first off, I kind of think that she sounds older than 17, just kind of in general.
Yeah.
I've been pretty impressed by that. I just can't imagine myself at the age of 17 being able to do or talk or sing or write about things quite like this. But, in general, when I approached the record, I loved Bad Guy. I thought that was a great song. I thought Wish You Were Gay was great. And then the rest of the record felt just meh. There was just something missing. But, as I have talked to you guys about before, when I start to dig into the artists and learn more about them and the writing process and everything around the album, I suddenly get a lot more excited about the songs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the record really grew on me. I came to really like it. I'm very surprised that in this era, at her age and the audience that she is sort of singing to, that she's got an actual album. You know what I mean? That the songs, they sound cohesive.
Yeah.
Yes, every track kind of has a different accent to it, kind of trying to change it up so it doesn't sound too repetitive. I mean, the album's obviously not perfect, but in 2019 to put something out like this, is,
that's true.
An album, I feel like it's worth listening to. Was pleasantly surprising.
Yeah, I mean, I will defend her, I think, from accusations of being an industry plant, but I will also say that I think this is fairly mediocre. Like it's okay. I think there are a couple songs that are fun, but not like mind-blowingly fun. You know, I think of like Bad Guy, you know, you mentioned like one of the best pop songs you've heard like lately, and I think like, you know, kinda, but then, you know, I think of like that Ariana Grande song Thank You Next. Like I don't like her at all, but that song to me feels like transcendently.
See,
like,
I hate that
so
song.
catchy.
I fucking cannot
Weird.
stand that song or her at all. I really hate
yeah,
her.
I really don't like her at all, but I was like, God damn, I gotta hand it to her. Like that's a catchy ass song. I mean, Bad Guy, I feel like
Bad Guy's a good song?
I feel like it's a good song. I'm like, that's good for like you know, a couple like 10 listens and then like I'll be good. I feel like the production is often kind of elevating what are like just really okay songs, which is, you know, I guess I must admit it's a positive quality. And then I feel like the record ends with 3 absolute fucking duds.
Yeah,
like,
I will
just
agree
right in
there.
a row.
Yeah.
Like 10 minutes of a 40-minute record in a row is just clunker after clunker. It gets like, you know, we talked about that humor, that sort of fun playfulness, and there are songs on here where she's like really quite serious, even early on, and yet the production I find quite playful in a cool way. But these last couple songs are just straight up like piano ballads, like plucked guitar ballads.
Like, I love you. Like sort of reminded me of like Ocean Eyes. It's just like
yeah.
It's
anonymous,
okay,
just
yeah,
anonymous.
like somebody on YouTube.
I like that song. I think I could have done without the 2 songs before it. You know, I feel like you're kind of worn out by the time you get to I Love You. You know what I mean? I feel like that song it probably could have ended the record for me, and then I would have dropped Listen Before I Go.
I would have mixed that shit up, man.
Yeah.
Because like Listen Before I Go and I Love You are the 2 longest songs in the album. They come back to back, and they're like basically the same song. They're so slow. They're so melodramatic. Listen Before I Go is like the cringiest shit ever because it's like a suicide note, and then like at the end there's like police sirens, you know, like as if she like really did it, she really jumped off this building or whatever. I mean, there's not an ounce of humor or self-awareness. People compare her to Lana Del Rey, but Lana Del Rey is like ironic. She's like self-aware pop star. This is like if Lana Del Rey had no self-awareness whatsoever, which is kind of defeats the whole point. And then I felt like the last song, Goodbye, you know, okay, I appreciate that it is actually a closing track, meant to be a closing track. I really appreciate that it's only 2 fucking minutes long after those long ass boring songs. But it's just, you know what it is? It's just
all the
every line.
Before,
Every line is just a line from previous
I thought,
song.
it was like a cheap version, like a cheap reprise.
Yeah. It's a very lazy way to add finality to a project.
It's a
like,
full
imagine
album,
if a movie, imagine if a movie just ended with like flashbacks of every scene that, you know, was like, remember this scene? That was a good scene,
idea.
wasn't it? Remember this one? You know, I was just like, what are we doing here? You know, so a really flawed thing, I think. You know, we talked about some of these like highlights, and you know, I guess we talked about some stuff that we actually really didn't like. You know, were there any other like sort of things you wanted to spotlight here? Because I kind of want to move on to the meta conversation about the backlash, the you know, why the backlash? Why such a strong backlash? Maybe we already got into it with the industry plan stuff, but then why such a strong defense if it seems like we all kind of think it's okay, right?
I think it's a little better than okay, you know? Like, I think it's
give it a rating, Dan. Give it a rating.
I'd give it like a low 7, like a 7, 7.1, 7.2, something like that, you know? Like,
so why is it so divisive if it's like a 7? It's like a good...
I think...
You know, what is going on?
I don't know. The divisiveness really, like, that was one of the reasons I was sort of not looking forward to listening to this, because generally when things are like real divisive like that, I sort of end up on the I hate it, you know, sort of scale.
Okay.
But you know, so I was like really sort of shocked like why there is any sort of like division on this, because I think either you're gonna think maybe it's just a reaction to like the people who think that this is like the second coming, you know, of something,
right.
And because
the label that wants us to believe that it's the second coming.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think it's that, you know. So maybe people are like pushing against like the overwhelming hype, you know, that maybe it doesn't like necessarily deserve. But I think like it's exciting. I think that she gets the hype because it's exciting that like she is so young and everything, and has made something like Darren said, like, can you imagine like you at 17 like making something that's like half as good as this, you know? And I think people push back against that. I think a lot of people too just like want her to fail, you know? Like it's just like sort of mean spirited.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, the
Darren?
internet it's just a mean place.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna give it a rating. I'm gonna give it an 8.5 B&M. Okay.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm not kidding because B&M means that the album should be listened to. This should be listened to. Yes, there's issues with it. Of course, there's issues with it, and there's some songs that are not great. There's some songs that are really good, and I think that it's definitely something everyone should give a listen to. Now, in response to the divisiveness and all of that, I mean, when something is everywhere, all over the place, constantly being talked about, referenced, memed, whatever, you know, people are going to start to hate it. You know what I mean? There's going to be the stans out there who are always going to defend Billie Eilish, the millions of followers on Instagram.
But it took like, you know, 7 years for that to happen to Taylor Swift, you know? Like everybody loved her for a long time, and then the backlash.
But I think with her, she's sort of a bad example because she started in the country music world. And in the country music world, people, for the most part, just listen to like the people who are on the radio. And she was on the radio, and so they don't get like, you know, like there's just like this handful of artists that are like spoon-fed to them, and she was one of those.
Anybody else that's just like, you know, I don't know, Katy Perry. Nobody ever felt like...
Because Katy Perry
was never divisive.
Because nobody...
You know,
because I don't think...
There's no Lord backlash at all.
Because nobody...
Because you
why the second that Billie Eilish came out...
Exactly. Nobody
why?
acted like Katy Perry was anything more than the next sugary, saccharine pop star. You know, like nobody acted like she was.
Just left her alone because it's like, why would we even take her?
Yeah,
serious?
it's like fighting against Britney Spears. You know, it's just the next one of those. Whereas like Billie Eilish has like sort of like invaded their cool kid indie club a little bit. You know.
Well, yeah, and the people are like,
they push back
we should take her seriously. She's different. She's better than those people. And then, you know, the record label's like, yeah, she's different. She's unique. She's also very popular. People feel like they have to respond.
Yeah, they have to push back.
It's got a slight vibe of that, like, you know, that Reddit, like, not like other girls.
Yeah.
Where, you know, somebody claims to be like really unique or special or something. You know, not like her herself, but I mean, like the way the label talks about her, like she's not like other artists. Where I feel like she is kind of like a pop artist, but yeah, I mean, I see. So, I don't know if I'm like in full agreement because I felt like something really weird happened where it's the second she came out, there was a huge backlash, and then there was a backlash to the backlash to where I can't even like tell what's what anymore. But it's like the defenders, I don't even know how sincere they are because it's like they're defending extra hard. I feel like Tom York would never have said this if there wasn't the question
I agree with that,
in the first place. And I feel like, you know, Fantano, he gave this like an 8 out of 10, a really good score. And, you know, I feel like he's being a little edgy, you know. In fact, I feel like he's become very calculating lately.
Yeah,
speaking of, you know, plants, where he's kind of like he sees an in
like that Kid See Ghost 10.
Yeah, he's like, okay, I'm gonna get all the disaffected Kanye fans. I'm gonna get, you know, next he's gonna give like BTS a 10, and you'll know for sure that he's
I'm in.
He's just pandering, but. You know, and then I saw like serious music critics, like people like Stephen Hyden and stuff, putting it on their like best of the year so far list. And I feel like it's a little bit of a overcorrection to what was already a crazy too intense backlash. So there's just something, you know, I found it very fun actually this past 2 weeks to like wonder what the hell is going on. But yeah, I would give it something like a 6. I think it's like a point better. It's a point better than like No Need to Hear This, to where it's like, yeah, it wouldn't hurt to hear it, but, you know.
But if you saw that on Pitchfork, you probably wouldn't listen to it. And you don't think this is good enough or important enough to listen to?
No. What makes it important? I mean, because I feel like really it's the sounds of... We should return to this, actually, because I don't think we fully hashed it out, but it's like the sounds of 2011 or something somehow have made it to the mainstream. And it might be blowing people's minds, but I heard like James Blake's first album a long ass time ago, you know, and that was actually much more interesting than this, you know. I heard Yeezus a lot, and it's like, you know, it's kind of a more palatable version of like what was really adventurous music almost 10 years ago now. You disagree?
I mean, I do, because I just don't think it's just about the music with Billie Eilish. You know what I mean? When you say James Blake's early records, like, great. What else about James Blake was, you know, so intriguing back then? Nothing, you know. The music was good. That's fine. That's fine. Kanye West is a little bit different because, again, we can talk about the whole story behind Kanye. That's what makes him, you know, just as much as interesting as the music itself. Billie Eilish is kind of like falling into that same place. You know what I mean? Like, she is sort of like pushing against, pop star images and stuff. And even whether or not that's like Interscope, like pushing that sort of thing and bottling it up, I still feel like, and we seem to all agree, that that's genuinely Billie Eilish. She's just getting a platform, you know. What the executives are giving her is a platform to do that, and people are relating to it. So she's, you know, like a rising star, but she's not a plant. She wasn't invented. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, all right, so let's move on to the inevitable next step of this conversation, which I see a lot and actually bugs me, which is like, if you criticize this album at all, people always say something like, yeah, but she's only 17. Like, isn't it amazing that she made this at 17? You kind of mentioned this.
Yeah, I've said it a few times.
It's like, I guess so, yeah, but like, I don't, you know, that's not how I listen to stuff.
And that's,
I'm not like,
that's why
the person who made this, you know, had no arms or legs. Like, it makes it better, you know, or something. You know, I'm just like not gonna like grade on a curve like
God.
that.
No, and that's why
it was probably inappropriate.
And that's why I gave that a 7 and not a B&M like Darren would, because I think it's a pretty good record. It's impressive for her age, but that's not a reason to listen to it.
Who cares?
That's not a reason that everybody needs. I think it's a reason to keep her maybe on your radar when the next record comes out.
That's my next question. Do you guys expect great things from her moving forward, or is this kind of like a one-off?
I'll definitely, the next record she puts out, I'll give it a spin. If it's great, then I'll say awesome. You know, I'll keep her on the radar. If it's bad, I'll say whatever. She couldn't cut it out. You know, she's sort of like what her next move is. I think will define, like,
very important.
Yeah,
very,
yeah.
very important.
This next move.
And I don't have high hopes.
Yeah, honestly, I don't either. I honestly,
I think this is the height of her stardom and her career.
Wouldn't you say, Darren, like, when it comes to Lord's Pure Heroin album, like, I never listened to that again, you know, like, that it basically was like the song Royals and Tennis Court when you boiled it down, and they were great songs, especially Royals, but I'm never going to listen to that again. And yet Lorde, basically with her next album, kind of made like a great stride forward that I thought was really an interesting and strong pop album. And to me, this feels kind of like just like Lorde's Pure Heroin, which is like, with a little space, we'll look back and we'll realize it was like a couple good songs, and it will really depend entirely on her next step. You agree with that, Darren?
I do, and I think that Lorde made
Except you're going to give us an 8.5 B&F.
Because I'm banking on this one. I think this is it, right? I really do.
He's really cashing in.
It's gonna get any better than this. You know, Lorde's second album I love, you know, quite a bit when it came out. Of course, I haven't really listened to it so much since then, but I thought it was the step in the right direction. You know, even though it's not, you know, we're not really talking about Lorde that much anymore. Oh well, you know, I hope that Billie Eilish does something similar and just gets more weird. Like, I think that's the only way to go.
That would be key. Yeah. And yeah, she should stop really like, oh, that'll be great. That's how she should do it. She needs to go like full Nirvana, which is like, I don't want to be the voice of a generation. Like, fuck this. I'm going to make a really, you know, abrasive in utero. I'm going to hire Steve Albini and it's going to like shed all my casual fans. That's what she needs to do.
She could say like bad guy really paid off well.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Brilliant.
I'm loving
it. So the last thing I wanted to ask basically is, and this is I guess I wouldn't call this conspiracy gay, but it's like just, you know, a weird thought of mine. But I really firmly believe that, like, for some reason, I don't know why, the world of music seems to change, like, basically right in line with the start of a new decade every time. And we are basically approaching that. And so a lot of people, a lot of reviews I've read talk about this Billie Eilish album like it's going to define the sound of pop to come. In my opinion, it sounds like the sound of pop that already came a while ago. And this might be like the end of the 2010s, you know, like, you know how that happens sometimes where it's like something comes out and it just kind of like caps it off, you know,
like a Guns N' Roses sort of thing.
Yeah, like it ends the classic rock period. It like ends the 80s.
I could see that.
Do you feel like Billie Eilish will be more like that, or she'll be an indication of what's to come?
I could see it being the former, because, you know, like you said, like she's sort of like distilling all these like things that sort of happened sort of in the underground, and she's like bringing it into the mainstream. So that is a way to cap it off. But I think also we might be moving into, and I think we've talked about this off air before. I think we might be moving into a sort of a look back period where like a new metalish thing kind of arises, because this has some little mild tinges of it, and all that like XXX Tentacion stuff, like it all like sort of like a little bit points to it. And if you think about it,
there's a little emo, there's a little rock, like XXX Tentacion is like basically a rock artist in a weird way.
And if you think about it, like to these people, like she was born in like 2001 or something, so like after 9/11, that's nuts. That blew my mind. I read that, it blew my mind. But like
your birthday, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But like we're sort of like, think about it, like Korn was like huge in like 98, 99. Like that's gonna be like the thing, like these people growing up like sort of discover, like whereas like we discovered Nirvana, like Nirvana was like a band that was like big when we were little kids, like we were a little too young, or not a little, we were too young for Nirvana. Kurt died in 94. I was 7 years old. Like I hate it.
So it sounds like you're basically saying that, like,
I see
there's stuff in here that you could see carrying on, but other stuff that you feel like is kind of
it's sort of like a maybe like a barometer or so. It's like you're seeing like little
transitional.
Yeah, you're seeing like little tinges of it. But I think we're heading for a disaster of a new metal. We got a new Tool
new metal.
10-year anniversary of all these new metal bands.
We got a new Tool record coming.
We got a new Slipknot.
Yeah, exactly. And people are like it got a Pitchfork review. Like people are acting like you should care. I'm seeing it coming. I'm seeing it. Mark my words.
All right, so that's Dan's official prediction: is that new metal is coming back, and he sees a little bit of it in Billie Eilish. Darren, do you think? That original question, I mean, is this a harbinger of things to come, Billie Eilish, or is it really just kind of a capstone here?
It's really tough because I feel like I could argue both sides. I'd like what you guys are saying about the capstone sort of thing, but at the same time, I keep thinking about her age at this point and the age of, the audience that is listening to her, you know what I mean? I feel like depending on which direction she goes, I mean, I don't think that her audience is going to grow up with her into the 2020s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
By the time she's like, 25 or whatever, where will we be, and how much of an influence will this record have on those years prior? I feel like it's not going to go away, at least in the mainstream pop world. You know what I mean? I think we are in for a Billie Eilish and like other artists that are, not half naked and just dripping sex and stuff like that. I think that is, at least, if anything, that's going to be the direction that we head in. Like there won't be as many Ariana Grandes out there. There will be more people like Billie Eilish. There might be even more of an aesthetic influence, you're right, than even like a musical influence, which would be interesting. And yeah, I guess I want to throw my hat in the ring like Dan so boldly did and just sort of predict the next decade, but I really am not sure what it's going to be. But I am still sort of struck by the idea that, the kids that are, her age, they were like discovering music in the early 2010s, I guess. So I don't know what that means for music, but that's really a weird thing to wrap my head around. But then, like you said, Dan, it does feel like a lot of these kids are going to look back, and who knows what they're going to pull out. But anyway, I think it's more of a look back than a look forward. I don't know. How do we wrap this up? What did we learn about Billie Eilish today?
Hold on to those Slipknot records. You're going to need them. That's what we're learning.
That's the main takeaway here.
Yeah, I mean, I think in doing all of this, I've come away feeling like, she's a genuine artist. I can get behind her. I'm willing to defend her now and not just look from the outside thinking, one way or the other. Like, I feel like I can pretty firmly say, like, I like Billie Eilish. I like what she's doing. At the same time, we can clearly recognize what's also going on with the industry and the record label that's backing her. But, you know, unlike some of the other pop artists that we've mentioned before, I think Billie Eilish stands out as somebody who is, you know, being genuine in the, you know, the persona that she is embracing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, my big takeaway from this exercise was that Billie Eilish is like actually a really fascinating, like, kind of lens through which to view music and popular culture, really, like as it exists right now, for good and bad. It is really fascinating. And yet I will basically promise you that I don't think I'll ever listen to this album again.
Wow. Really out of touch, old man.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's enough for this week. So what do you think? We'd love to read your thoughts on the air. You can email us, popshieldpod@gmail.com. Next episode in 2 weeks. Not sure what we're talking about yet, but if you like the show, help us out. Subscribe, give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Stay connected. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that junk is at PopShieldPod, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.
So long.